Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I arrived home from work at my usual time to find my wife of 6 years ironing one of her cocktail dresses. My first thought was that we must have plans tonight, which immediately got me excited. I always loved taking her out. She always looked stunning whenever we went out, and seeing other guys steal envious glances at her gave me a bit of a confidence boost. After all, she was with me, and all they could do was admire from afar. With her rich dark skin, deep brown eyes, long flowing hair, and athletic build, she was absolutely gorgeous. She'd been on the college crew team and still maintained some of that toned, athletic physique, though she now preferred running and aerobics over rowing. Before I could ask what our plans were, she spoke up, her attention focused on her ironing. "You'll never guess who I ran into today," Becky said, keeping a steady rhythm with the iron. "Timothy." "Timothy?" I searched my memory, trying to place the name. Only one person came to mind. "Timothy? Your high school boyfriend, Timothy?" I asked cautiously. "Yes. Can you believe it? Just out of nowhere, after all these years." For context, Timothy had been Becky's boyfriend during her last 2 years of high school. I'd never met him. Becky and I didn't cross paths until college, but I'd heard plenty about him. According to her, they were deeply in love and only broke up because they went to colleges on opposite sides of the country. When Becky and I met during freshman orientation, we clicked right away, but I had to settle for friendship initially since she wasn't ready for a new relationship. By the end of freshman year, she finally agreed to date me, but that summer, she returned to her hometown. I visited her once for a few days and met her large, traditional Mexican family who, to my surprise, welcomed me, the white guy with darker Italian skin, quite easily. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if Timothy had made an appearance during that summer. Neither of us brought him up, so I assumed he was part of her past and hoped he was out of her mind as well. "So, where did you run into him?" I asked casually. "In the lobby of my office building," she replied. "I was coming back from lunch, and there he was." At first, I wasn't sure if it was really him, but then he saw me, and he recognized me right away. Turns out he's a rep for a pharmaceutical company and visits this area every other Wednesday to meet with some of the doctors in the building. "Isn't that wild?" "Wild?" I echoed, trying to match her enthusiasm, though her excitement felt a bit too much for my liking. I mean, what are the odds of us just bumping into each other like that? It's crazy. Anyway, we're having dinner tonight to catch up. That explained the cocktail dress. I didn't love the idea of a third wheel joining us if we were going out. I always enjoyed having her all to myself, but if this was a special occasion, I could make an effort to be gracious and make her happy. "Oh, okay. When do I need to be ready?" I asked. She stopped ironing and turned to me, a look of surprise on her face. "Oh, no, honey. I didn't mean we're all having dinner. It's just him and me." My stomach sank. "Just you and him? Why not bring me along? Why wouldn't you want me there?" He asked if I'd like to have dinner and catch up, and I said yes. "We'll just be reminiscing about old times. I don't want to worry about what you might think, or if you'd feel uncomfortable hearing about things from before we met. I just want to talk freely. Besides, you'd probably be bored. But you know I only love you, baby. Honey, it's completely inappropriate for a married woman to go out alone with another man, especially an ex. Even if nothing happens, imagine how it would look if someone we know saw you out with him." "Ronald, it's not a date," she said, her tone turning defensive. "It's just two old friends catching up over dinner. I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this." She set the iron down, inspecting her dress for wrinkles. "If it's not a date," I countered, "then why are you pulling out one of your sexy cocktail dresses?" "You know I like to dress up when I go out," she shot back. "It doesn't mean anything. You're acting like you don't trust me." "It's not about trust," I replied firmly. "It's about respect. How would you feel if I told you I was having dinner with an ex-girlfriend and said you couldn't come?" "I'd say that's fine," she responded quickly, "because I trust you and know you love only me." I didn't buy that for a second. "Becky, this isn't okay with me. You're not going to dinner with Timothy by yourself. Either you don't go or I go with you." That struck a nerve. "You're not my father, Ronald. You're my husband. I'm a grown woman, and you don't get to dictate what I can or can't do. I'm going and you're not, and if you don't like it, that's too bad." Grabbing her dress, she stormed into the bedroom and locked the door behind her. I sighed, pulled a beer from the fridge, and sat at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of what had just happened. We'd always worked through disagreements by talking things out until we found common ground. Neither of us had ever flatly refused to compromise like this. When she finally came out, she looked breathtaking, too breathtaking for what she was about to do, at least in my opinion. As she walked past me, She paused to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. "We can talk about this more when I get home, okay?" she said softly. I wasn't having it. "We've already talked about it. You've made your position perfectly clear. You're going to do whatever you want, and my feelings don't matter. At least now I know where we stand. Just don't forget to use a protection." She froze, her eyes blazing with anger. "I'm not going to sleep with him, you son of a bitch. It's just dinner." "Damn you," she snapped before storming out and slamming the door behind her. I went to bed early, trying to stop my mind from wandering to where she was or what they might be discussing. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard her come in. She headed straight to the bathroom, but since she typically showered at night, I didn't think much of it. A few minutes later, she slid under the covers beside me, her bare skin warm against mine. Leaning in close, she whispered softly in my ear. "Baby, I could use some tonight. How about a little makeup sex?" she murmured. I turned to face her, my expression flat. "Honestly," I said, "the idea of you getting all worked up with Timothy and then coming home to me doesn't exactly appeal. I'd just be wondering who you were really thinking about. And besides, I don't think we've actually made up yet." I rolled over, signaling the end of the conversation, but she wasn't about to let it go. What she said next, though, caught me off guard. "Well, would you rather I got turned on by you and then went to have sex with him?" she shot back. Without turning to face her, I replied evenly. "So you're admitting you got turned on being with him?" "No, that's not what I meant," she stammered. "All I'm saying is that no matter what, I'm coming home to you. I love you, damn it, and I don't see why you can't understand that or trust me." She wasn't getting it. I sat up, meeting her gaze. "And I don't see why you can't understand why this bothers me," I said firmly. "No matter who he was to you back then, you're my wife now. I think my feelings should matter. They always have before. But now that St. Timothy's back in town, it feels like I'm just an obstacle for you to ignore, so you can do whatever you want." She looked at me, momentarily taken aback, and for a brief second, it seemed like she finally understood how deeply hurt I was. Her shoulders sagged, and she lowered her head. "You're right, baby," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I should have been more considerate of your feelings. I got caught up in the excitement of seeing him again and forgot who really matters to me. Can you forgive me?" Relieved that she seemed to understand, I pulled her into my arms. "Of course, I forgive you, honey." She looked up at me with her beautiful brown eyes, now soft and full of sincerity. "Can we make love now?" We could, and we did. I thought that was the end of it and put the whole situation out of my mind. That is, until 2 weeks later. Becky called me to say she'd be working late, explaining it was for a special project she needed to finish. Coincidentally, it was a Wednesday, the same day Timothy supposedly came through town on his usual schedule. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of suspicion. On my way home from work, I decided to swing by her office, bringing a couple of sandwiches as a thoughtful surprise for dinner. I signed in at the building's security desk and headed up to her floor. Becky worked in the front office of a major insurance company, and in the 3 years she'd been there, this was the first time she'd ever mentioned needing to stay late. The entry door was locked since it was after hours, so I knocked. The door was glass, and as soon as she approached, she'd be able to see me. I half expected the office to be empty, but there she was, seated at her desk, focused on her work. When she looked up and spotted me, her face lit up with that beautiful smile I adored. "Hey, baby. What a nice surprise," she said, walking over to greet me with a kiss. "What brings you here?" "I thought I'd bring you a sandwich for dinner," I said. "Figured we could still have dinner together, even with you working late." "That's so sweet of you," she replied. "Let's eat, but let's make it quick. The more time I spend not working, the longer I'll have to stay." We spent about 15 minutes eating together, chatting about our days. Then I kissed her goodbye and left, leaving her to finish up. On the drive home, I felt a bit silly for having doubted her. Maybe that dinner with Timothy really had been the end of it. They'd caught up, she'd put the past behind her, and life was moving on. I told myself I could trust her again. But then it happened again, 2 weeks later. The same call came through. She'd be working late on another special project. If it was true, it was a positive sign that her company valued her and was entrusting her with more responsibility. But the timing felt suspiciously convenient, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it might just be an excuse. This time, I decided to keep things simple and called her direct office line. Since my number would show up on the caller ID, I figured she'd pick up if she was actually at her desk. It felt like a discreet way to confirm she was where she said she'd be, less intrusive than calling her cell, which she could answer from anywhere. Besides, with security cameras in the office, It seemed unlikely that anything inappropriate could happen there. I called her at 5:45 and again at 6:30. Both times, she picked up on the second ring with her usual cheerful voice. A quick, "I love you. I miss you. Just wanted to hear your voice," was all I needed to settle my nerves. Feeling a tentative sense of peace, I started to believe that my suspicions might be unfounded. When she came home at her usual time the following Wednesday, another day Timothy was supposed to be in town, I let myself hope that whatever had happened before was truly behind us. 2 weeks later, Becky called to say she'd be working late again. This time, it was a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, which helped ease my concerns even further. From that point on, her late nights shifted to every other Thursday. I made it a habit to call her office line once each time, just to hear her voice and calm my lingering doubts. She always answered, cheerful and reassuring, and over time, my confidence in her grew a little more with each call. Things might have continued as they were if not for an office party hosted by Becky's insurance company about 4 months after this all began. It was a Friday evening event at a local Mexican restaurant in their banquet room. Her company held these gatherings twice a year, one in December for Christmas and another in June, which was the current occasion. While I recognized a few familiar faces from previous events, I didn't know anyone well, as I only attended these functions occasionally. As the evening progressed, I found myself chatting with various guests, spouses, significant others, and a few employees. The conversation that changed everything happened with an older woman named Sheila, who introduced herself as the office manager and the one responsible for assigning extra work. "So, you're the one making my married life a little harder," I joked, keeping my tone light. Sheila gave me a puzzled look. "I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand what you mean," she said. Still trying to keep things casual, I mentioned the special projects Becky had been assigned, which had required her to stay late at work a couple of times each month. Sheila's expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm a bit confused," she said, her tone more serious now. "I haven't assigned Becky any extra projects over the past few months. There have only been a couple, and those went to other team members. I know she's stayed late here and there, but that was usually to make up for the extended lunches she's been taking. For errands, as far as I know." Well, didn't I feel like a fool? I stammered some awkward excuse, trying to mask my embarrassment, but a heavy lump settled in my stomach. I had trusted Becky, taking her word at face value, just as trust in a marriage should be, but now it seemed that trust had backfired. I never once connected her late nights with her extended lunches. The shift to Thursdays suddenly felt explainable. Timothy might have adjusted his schedule. Maybe they noticed I'd been checking up on her and thought a change would throw me off, or perhaps it was just coincidence. Either way, the pieces were falling into place. All I needed now was proof. So, when the next every other Thursday arrived, I borrowed a friend's car and parked outside my wife's office building. Shortly after noon, I saw her emerge from the lobby, holding hands with a man who I assumed was Timothy. They walked together toward the parking lot, completely oblivious to the world around them. I took a few photos as they strolled away, surprised by how openly they acted. Her coworkers might not have known exactly what I looked like, but it seemed reckless to assume no one would recognize that the man wasn't me. They got into a Ford Taurus and merged into traffic, with me following closely behind. The traffic was heavy enough that I didn't have to worry about being noticed. They eventually pulled into the parking lot of a Super 8 motel, taking a route that bypassed the office. It seemed like he had planned this. I parked further down the lot, out of sight, and started taking pictures. He led the way, opening the motel room door, and they paused in the doorway as Becky kissed him deeply. My stomach churned, and I noticed she still had her rings on. I couldn't help but wonder if it excited him that she was wearing my rings while they were together. While I waited, I made a few calls, setting up a meeting with a lawyer and informing my office that I'd be taking a few days off. Mostly, though, I just sat there, waiting. Finally, around 2:30, the door opened. I took a few more pictures as Becky emerged, still adjusting her clothes and running her fingers through her disheveled hair. I didn't need any more evidence to know what had just taken place. I put my camera away and drove home. I felt a sense of relief that we hadn't started a family or bought a house. At least this separation would be straightforward in terms of assets. We only had our cars and savings, which would be easy to divide. The expected call came shortly after. I was told she'd be working late on another project. I simply told her that was fine, and that I'd see her at 7:30. I didn't bother calling her that evening, feeling there was no point. But she noticed right away, and when she asked, "Honey, I was expecting your call. You've always called me when you're working late to say you love me. What happened?" I had to come up with an excuse quickly. "I'm sorry, baby. I was in the garage working on something and lost track of time. By the time I realized, you were already on your way home. I promise I won't forget again, though I hope these late nights end soon. Soon, I think, she replied. If not, I'll ask them to assign the projects to someone else. I was determined that the next time would be the last. I had already made all the arrangements, including splitting the finances. Even though I knew what was coming, I didn't bother following her again. I already had everything I needed. So, when the call came that she was staying late again, I wasn't surprised. I grabbed dinner on the way home, but I barely tasted it. Then, I began packing my things. I had a couple of hours before Becky got home, and all I had were my clothes and toiletries. The rest of the apartment, decor, kitchen stuff, was all Becky's style. Cheap and generic. I didn't want any of it. I called her like before, trying to keep things normal for one last time. By the time Becky walked in at 7:25, I was fully packed and my things were already loaded in the car. She was in a good mood as she came through the door. "Hey, baby," she greeted, setting down her things. "How was your day?" She leaned in for a kiss, but I pulled back. "Becky, we need to talk." Okay, honey. Let me put these down." We sat at the kitchen table, a place where so many memories had been made over the years. She smiled, unaware of what was about to happen, as if we were about to have a casual conversation about buying that new sofa we'd been considering. But she had no idea how serious this was going to get. "So, you've been working late a lot recently. How are your projects going?" I asked. Great. They seem really impressed with the work I'm doing. Hopefully, it'll lead to good things down the road. Tell me about them." "What?" She hadn't expected me to ask for specifics. She thought she could get away with just saying projects, and that would be enough. But I wasn't buying it. "The projects," I repeated, leaning in. "Tell me about them. What have you been working on?" Just some analysis, of rates in certain areas and things like that. I'm glad it's going well for you. So, is there anything you'd like to tell me?" "Just that I love you." "But you already knew that." I thought I did, until I found out about you and Timothy." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "That again, Ronald. Damn it, I haven't done anything with him. I haven't even seen him since that one time months ago." "Haven't seen him in months? Is that right? Are you sure about that?" "Yes, Ronald. I'm sure." But her face betrayed the certainty of her words. She was worried now. "Then maybe you can explain who this guy is," I said, sliding the pictures I had taken across the table, placing the one of her stumbling out of the hotel room on top. Her head dropped, and then I pushed the divorce papers in front of her. "No, Ronald, please, it was nothing, just nothing. Can't we work through this? Counseling, whatever you want," she pleaded. "Of course not, Becky. I told you from the start that cheating was a deal breaker, and I meant it. You're my wife, and in just the last few months, I haven't even been the last person you've been with. And you lied about it, right up until I shoved the pictures in your face. You've shown me nothing but disrespect for me and for our marriage. There's no fixing this. I thought we had something good, and I'm sorry that, apparently, I wasn't enough for you. Oh, Ronald, please don't think it was ever about you. I love you with all my heart, and it was never about you. I can't explain it. All those old feelings came rushing back when I saw him again, and I wanted to experience it one more time. The first night, it was just dinner, and I thought that would be the end of it. But then, he kept invading my thoughts. I was a virgin when we met, so I'd never been with the person I considered my first love. I got caught up in it, and when he came back 2 weeks later and asked me to lunch, I agreed. We ended up at a hotel. I did it willingly. I wish I could say I didn't, but I did. After that, it was easier every time, but it wasn't as exciting. I was thinking about ending it, but I guess I was too late. I'm sorry, Ronald. Please, I love you. Is there anything I can do to fix this? I'm sorry too, Becky. I really did love you. I walked out of the apartment for the last time. For months later, the divorce was final. At least she respected my decision and didn't fight it. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment, and as expected, Becky transferred to a different office and moved in with Timothy. I threw myself into my work, and by the time the divorce was finalized, I had earned a nice bonus and was on track for a promotion after our successful pitch to a large Japanese electronics company. Even though I knew I could never be with her again, I still missed her. She had always been the most beautiful woman in the world to me, and I couldn't help but wonder how anyone could ever compare. Almost a year later, I received a text from Becky. She was in town and wanted to meet for drinks. We arranged to meet at a small bar not far from my apartment that evening. When I walked in, I immediately noticed she had lost weight. She still looked beautiful, but in a different way. I greeted her warmly with a light hug and a peck on the cheek. "So, what brings you to town, Becky?" I asked as I sat across from her. I ordered a Coke, having never developed a taste for alcohol, but surprised her by adding a strawberry daiquiri to my order. She noticed. "Alcohol, Ronald? That's not like you," she remarked. "Things have changed a lot over the past year." "Life's full of surprises," I replied. "I suppose you're right. Actually, I'm thinking about moving back. I miss it here. Is Timothy able to work from this area?" I asked. It was a sincere question. I had moved past the anger and hurt. "We're not together anymore. He was cheating on me," she said. "Is that so?" I responded, surprised but not shocked. How ironic, I thought. It turns out I wasn't the only regular stop on his route, even back then, and he never stopped with any of them, even after I moved in with him, she continued. "I'm sorry to hear that. How did you find out?" "Well, it seems there were other husbands who were less understanding than you were. A couple of them got together to express their dissatisfaction with him and suggested that relocating might be wise. After he got out of the hospital, he disappeared. I have no idea where he went." She didn't seem particularly upset by it. "It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy." "So, are you trying to get your job back here?" "I'm looking into it, but everything's on hold while I try to make one specific arrangement," she said, flashing me that smile, the one I could never resist. But things had changed. "And what arrangement would that be, Becky?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Ronald, I'm really sorry for what I did. I was a fool who fell in love with a memory, a person who didn't exist anymore, and probably never did. We had a great marriage, and I still love you. I've learned my lesson. Is there any chance?" At that moment, a blur in a knee-length blue dress walked through the door, heading straight for my table, and more specifically, toward me. The tall blonde woman set her purse down on an empty chair and planted a quick kiss on my cheek. "Hey, baby. Sorry I'm late. My production meeting ran long. Is this my drink?" Without waiting for an answer, she grabbed the daiquiri and took a long sip through the straw. "I know. I got your text. Everything settled?" "Of course not. It never is. You know that. But I'm done talking about work and ready to enjoy the evening." I introduced them. "Renee, this is Becky, my ex-wife. Becky, this is my girlfriend, Renee. It's so nice to finally meet you," Renee said with genuine enthusiasm. "I was really excited when Ronald told me you were in town and we'd be meeting for drinks. I've heard a lot about you. Some of it good, I hope," Becky joked. "Almost all of it," Renee replied. "He speaks very highly of you." "Well, except for the last few months of your marriage, but I guess that's to be expected." I noticed Becky's eyes starting to well up. "He's a good guy," she said, her voice thick. "Hold on to him. Be smarter than I was." "I plan on it. We've already set the date," Renee answered, flashing her engagement ring at Becky. I watched as Becky's gaze shifted, her eyes landing on Renee's ring, and she seemed to deflate slightly. "Congratulations. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you," Becky said quietly. Renee smiled sadly. "You were hoping to get him back, weren't you?" Becky sighed. "I was. I thought maybe, with the time that had passed, we could try again. I didn't know you were seeing anyone, Ronald, let alone engaged. I hoped maybe you'd take a chance on me, but I guess I'm out of chances. I should probably go." "I wish you wouldn't leave," Renee said gently, placing her hand on Becky's arm. "I've actually been looking forward to getting to know you a bit better." Becky looked confused. "Why? Why would you want to get to know your fiancé's ex-wife?" "Becky, you were a significant part of his life for a long time, and you meant a lot to him. You helped shape him into the man I fell in love with. Why wouldn't I want to get to know you? Maybe even be friends? That said, I'll never let you two be alone together. That's just common sense." Becky snorted. "Yeah, someone once told me it's not exactly a good idea for someone in a relationship to be alone with their ex. If only she had taken that advice when I first gave it to her." As time went on, things settled into a rhythm that felt right. I kept my focus on building my career and my relationship with Renee, and things only grew stronger between us. Renee's warmth, understanding, and the way she made me laugh helped me heal from the past. I never expected to find someone who could make me feel whole again, but she did. It wasn't long before we started planning our future together. I proposed on a weekend getaway to a quiet cabin by the lake. I had the ring in my pocket for days, but the moment felt perfect. She said yes with a joyful tear in her eye, and I knew then that I'd never make the same mistakes again. We made our home together, filled with love, laughter, and a new sense of peace. Becky eventually moved on with her life, as did I, but I no longer carried the weight of what had happened. Renee and I made sure to keep building our life on the solid foundation of trust and mutual respect. Every day was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I truly felt like I had everything I needed. I realized that sometimes the greatest gifts in life come after the hardest lessons. And as I looked at Renee, laughing beside me, I knew I had found my real second chance. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.